This is going to be a brief video that helps us to review how to solve an equation for x or y, or really how to solve an equation for any variable. Now, in order to be able to solve a literal equation, we need to think about some things that we've previously learned. We need to know and understand how to solve a basic equation. So remember those steps. We always want to look to see if we can distribute first, then combine like terms on the same side of the equal sign, then combine like terms on the opposite side of the equal sign, specifically focusing on bringing the variables together first, then using the inverse operation to add or subtract, and then using the inverse operation to multiply or divide. So we need to know those steps. We need to understand what like terms are and the rules for combining like terms. We need to know what a term is, just what a simple term is. We need to know how to calculate integers, and we also need to know how to calculate fractions and decimals. So these are all topics that really we're going to be putting together to solve literal equations. So if you look at this list of topics and there's something or some things on here that you're like, forgot how to do that, or I might need more practice with that, then I would recommend that you stop the video right now and quickly go back and review those things so that when you are reviewing literal equations, it makes a little bit more sense and you're able to understand it more. So we're going to take a look at this example. Our job is to solve this equation for y, and we have the equation negative 3x plus 2y equals negative 16. The first thing we want to do is identify the variable we are solving for, because as I mentioned before, we're specifically focusing on x and y, and in this question, we're specifically focusing on solving for y. But sometimes you might be solving for x, sometimes there might be other variables involved that you might be solving for. It doesn't matter what it is or how many variables you have in the equation, you go about solving them or rewriting them the same way. So in this question, we're solving for y. After we do that, we want to add or subtract to move the entire term that is considered to be the constant in this equation. So we have three terms in this equation, negative 16, positive 2y, and negative 3x. And because our goal is to get rid of everything except for the y, think about 2 as being the coefficient to y, and our last step in solving any equation is to always multiply or divide. So I'm going to get rid of 2 last. I first and foremost want to move the entire term negative 3x to the other side of the equal sign. And how are you going to do that? You use opposite operations by adding or subtracting. So because this is negative 3x, I'm going to add 3x to both sides. Now, negative 3x plus 3x equals 0, and that's the goal, to get rid of it from that side of the equal sign. And on the other side, we can't calculate negative 16 plus 3x because they're not like terms. Therefore, all we're going to do is just rewrite the entire equation. 2y equals negative 16 plus 3x. And yes, it's okay to write 2y equals 3x minus 16 or 2y equals 3x plus negative 16. Those are all the same equations. Now, we're not done yet because, again, remember, the goal was to solve the equation for y, which means we want to get y by itself. So the very next thing we have to do is to multiply or divide each term by the coefficient in this equation. So if y is our variable, that means 2 is our coefficient, and we have still 3 different terms in this equation. So I'm going to divide 2 by every single one of those terms. After you do that, the last thing you're going to do is just go term by term and simplify. So we're going to start with this term. 2y divided by 2 leaves us with 1y, or just y, because 2 divided by 2 is 1. Negative 16 divided by 2 leaves us with negative 8. And 3x divided by 2, you can't really simplify that. You can change it to a decimal, that's fine. Or you can just leave it as 3 halves x. And don't forget, 3x over 2 and 3 halves x are the same thing because 3 halves times x is the same thing as saying 3 halves times x over 1. 3 times x is 3x, and 2 times 1 is 2. And that's it. That's all we have to do to solve an equation for a specific variable. And again, if this question were to ask you to solve the equation for x, you would go about the same steps, just keeping in mind that now you're solving for x. Now you have to know which is considered the coefficient and which term is considered your constant.